Hey guys, I'm back with you again this week. I hope you enjoyed the first week's training video where we talked about intentional relational discipleship. Before I jump into this week's training though, I wanted to tell you about something really encouraging. I couldn't be more encouraged actually right now than I am for this very reason, and I'm sharing it with you first. I'm going to share it at church on Sunday too, but I'm sharing it with you first because you are the ones that are helping the church make it happen, and I want to thank you for that. But after the last 2 weeks of talking with you all and finding out who's running a group, who's got a group going already, who's starting a group, I'm really encouraged to report that Woodlands Church has 9 disciple groups that are either going or going to be starting in September that have about 90 spaces in them, and 67 of those spaces are already filled with people. That is super encouraging because at our church on a normal Sunday morning, we have anywhere between 50 as a very low and 80 as a high, and somewhere around 70 as an average amount of people, including 20 kids. That means that there are more people involved in our disciple groups than there are people attending Sunday morning. And I think that's really great because of the good stuff that people are getting inside of groups in relationship and in Scripture. And so that's something to be really, really encouraged by, and I wanted to say thank you to all of you for helping me make that happen. Last week I talked to you about the beginning stages of who we are when we talk about discipleships in disciple groups. And I let you know, and I told you that I understand that our groups are going to be a little bit different, that they're going to feel a little different, that they're going to look a little bit different, and that's okay. But the one thing that we all have that's consistent is our DNA, right? Like at our root, there are certain things that we all do together and the same, so that all of our groups have the same DNA. I told you that DNA is called intentional relational discipleship. And I spent a good amount of time last week, about 9 or 10 minutes, talking to you about what it means to be intentional, or what it means to be an intentional leader, right? And the 3 things I told you were: an intentional leader recruits. Just like a coach recruits players for his team, you should be out recruiting people for your group. And some of your groups are already full, which means you've already won that one. You've already done that one, which is really encouraging and exciting. Secondly, a good coach, a good intentional leader knows his people or knows her people. You know who's in your group. You know about them. You're getting to know them emotionally, spiritually, and personally. And when you know your group, you know how to help them play their game better. You know how to help them in their walk better. You can challenge them. You can hold them accountable. You can encourage them, and you can help them grow where they need to grow. And the last thing I mentioned that an intentional leader does is he or she creates the right environment, which is actually what we're going to talk a lot about today. But when we talk about creating the right environment, we recruit our people, we know our people, and then based on those 2 things, we're creating an environment where all of those people can be challenged by Scripture, they can be challenged by one another, they can be held accountable, and they can be in relationship. And that's what today is about. It's about creating a relational environment. And that's really the key to this whole thing, is that, yeah, we want to be intentional leaders, but when we get our groups going and when we are discipling our people, we have to be in relationship with them. And I think that if you looked across the world at all of the Bible studies and small groups that are going on everywhere, I think the one place where we are the most weak as a whole is relationship. I think we get the Bible study right. I think we get theology right. I think we get meeting together right. And I think the one place where we oftentimes fall short is relationship. Now, I know when we say that word relationship, it can cause some people to pull back a little bit because we think, I don't need more relationship in my life. I like these people and I like to study the word with them, but I don't really want more mess in my life, because that's oftentimes what comes with a relationship. And we have to be honest about that. In relationship, when we're real with one another, sometimes it is difficult and sometimes it creates difficulty and tension, but that's where health comes in relationship, and that's where growth comes. And you may say, well, Daniel, where does this happen in Scripture? And if you were at church last Sunday morning, I talked all about this. But my favorite passage to go to when I think about relationship and I think about Jesus is the woman at the well. You guys know the story of the woman at the well, right? Just in really briefly, Jesus and his disciples had been traveling. They were hot, they were tired, they were thirsty, and they were hungry. By the end of the day, they get to this well that's just outside of a town. And Jesus sends his disciples into town to get food because they're hungry. But it says that Jesus was tired and thirsty, and he had ulterior motives. So he decided to stay at the well. He stays at the well, and you know the story. He meets a woman there, and he has this one-on-one relational encounter with this woman where he's real with her, she's real with him, and life change happens. Now here's what I want you to see though in that picture. It's not just about the relationship of the woman at the well and Jesus. It's what Jesus passed up in order to spend that time with that woman. Jesus passed up going into the town with his disciples with an opportunity maybe to preach, evangelize, teach in the synagogue, or heal people. He passed up the large group. He passed up the huge opportunity. He passed all of that up to be with the woman. I think that's a huge point for us to understand, that Jesus so often in his ministry, though there were times when he was with the crowds, he so often passed those times up to be with other people, a small group, his disciples, or to go off with his disciples and pray. And see, what happens is that when we choose to be in relationship, we have a few different opportunities. What relationship offers us, the opportunities it offers us, is it offers us a gateway into people's lives. If we don't have relationship with someone, we really don't have an opportunity to speak into their lives. Relationship, when we're honest and open with one another, it gives me the ability to challenge you and to encourage you, right? Like if I'm coming at you and I'm telling you need to do X, Y, and Z, you need to change A, B, and C, but I don't have a relationship with you, you're just going to think I'm a dictator. Relationship allows me to speak into your life. And then secondly, relationship allows mutual accountability, which is what we want. We don't want just a leader holding his disciple group accountable. We want mutual accountability happening in groups, and that's what comes out of relationship. And so let me give you a couple specific practical hands-on things you can do in your groups to create a relational environment. Number one is have clear guidelines for your groups. And attached to the email you got this video in, I gave you the list of guidelines that all of our groups should be using inside of your groups. And if you use our curriculum, you're supposed to be going over the rules weekly, at least in the beginning, so that people understand the rules. Do you know what guidelines do? They actually help relationship. You think rules don't help relationship? Maybe we don't want rules. No, you need them, because what rules do and guidelines do is they make people trust the system. They're going to help people trust you. They're going to believe in the guidelines and the rules about confidentiality and about sharing and about the things that are being said to one another. And the third thing it allows accountability if there is a breach of trust. If you never set any rules in your group about the things that are supposed to be happening in your group, and somebody goes out and says something they shouldn't about someone else, if you never set any guidelines, you don't really have the right to hold them accountable. But if you're going over these guidelines on a regular basis, you can go to people in the group that maybe have failed and said, hey, we talk about these rules and these guidelines every week. You need to get your act together, right? And so that's what rules and guidelines give you. Check the attachment I put on this email so that you can have these guidelines and you can go over them in your group. The second thing is to create a relational environment. And this is really the big one. I didn't put these in any specific order, but like if I did, this should have been number one. Be the example. If you want to drive relationship in your group, if you want people to be open, authentic, and real with one another and bond with one another, it starts with you, the leader. You have to be open and honest with your life. Others will only open up to you when you open up to them. When you open up to them about difficult places in your heart and things that are going on in your life, they're going to trust you, and that's going to build a bridge to them so that they feel like at the right moment they can share as well. And the other thing is, when you're building this relationship and you're sharing about yourself and they're sharing about you, do you know what's going to happen? When something happens in their life, for good or for bad, you know who they're going to run to? They're not going to run to me, they're going to run to you. And that's the way it should be. They should be running to not just the leaders and pastors in the church, they should be running to the people in which they have relationship with. The last one, number 3, is this: ask good questions. In a group setting, when you're trying to get people to open up and talk and interact with the scripture and interact with one another, the most important thing is having good questions. Now, if you are using a different curriculum, they probably give you questions. If you're going to use our curriculum, we give you questions. Here's what I want you to consider. Most times when you're using a Bible study book that you might have picked up off of Amazon or from a Christian bookstore, 90% of the questions in that book are going to be head level questions. They're going to ask about the story, about the scripture. They're going to help you think through things, the theology of it. Rarely do you find questions in there that are directed at the heart. Heart questions are by far, when you talk about a relational environment, are by far the most important questions you need to be asking. You need to be asking questions that challenge people's heart, challenge their actions, make them not just interact with what the scripture might mean, but what does the scripture mean to them? How does it apply to them? How do they need to be changed and transformed by the scripture or the story that you're talking through? This is another pitch for our curriculum. I really believe in the curriculum that Mike has written for our church, because he gives you the heart level questions that you need to be asking. On top of that, not only asking the heart level questions, you need to also learn to be a good follow-up question asker. I didn't say that very well, but I think you get the idea. Like when you see someone's egg starting to crack, like maybe someone who had a hard shell, and you've asked a question and the shell just starts to crack a little bit, you need to learn to follow up with that. Let the Spirit lead you in asking a question to continue to crack that shell. So just as a review, number 1, use guidelines in your group that will build trust and accountability. Number 2, be the example. You open up first. You be authentic first. You be real first, and watch how other people open up. And then number 3, learn how to ask good questions. All of those 3 things will help you create a relational environment. Not only will people be learning scripture, studying scripture, reading scripture, reciting scripture, but they'll be bonding, which is exactly what Jesus did with so many people through all of the Gospels. So with that, I hope you're recruiting for your group. I'm looking forward to Sunday morning to see about filling all these groups as we advertise them. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys on Sunday.